My name is Rachel Monroe, 48 Toy. I gave Stratex Materials 23 years of my life. I knew the hum of every furnace, the warning signs of pressure fluctuation before it showed up on the monitor, and which old compressors needed a little knock to behave. But none of that mattered the moment Mason Klein, our brand new 35-year-old CEO in a tailored Italian suit, leaned back in the boardroom chair and said, "Rachel, you've become an obstacle to our vision of modernization." I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I'd seen this coming the moment they brought in Mason from some VC-backed tech startup with no manufacturing experience. He canceled our quarterly safety drills within 2 weeks, called them non-revenue-generating waste. Then came the slashed maintenance budgets, streamlined inspections, and eventually, the removal of safety signs in high-risk areas because he thought they looked cluttered on investor tours. I voiced my concerns in emails, in one-on-one meetings, even during leadership huddles. I didn't whisper. I documented everything. Every rejected maintenance request, every ignored incident report, every email where someone in finance used the word acceptable risk, like they'd ever watched a man lose fingers in a press line. And on a Wednesday morning, just after I flagged a cracked containment seal in Furnace C as a Category 1 emergency, I got the meeting request. The entire leadership team was there, eyes down. Mason read from a statement, corporate and sterile. "This is not a performance issue, but a misalignment of priorities." They offered me 8 weeks severance and a reminder that my NDA was still active. I packed my things while a junior HR rep awkwardly stood guard, like I might suddenly sabotage a reactor. I didn't need to. They were already sabotaging themselves. Before I left, I looked at the wall behind my desk. Framed photos from plant safety awards. A handwritten thank you from a machinist I helped recover after a fall. I took those with me, along with a USB drive labeled, "For when someone finally listens. You want to cut corners and silence the alarms? Fine, just don't be surprised when the fallout doesn't knock quietly." The day after I turned in my badge, I brewed the strongest pot of coffee I'd made in months, sat at my kitchen table, and got to work. No bitterness, no revenge fantasy, just focus. What I had wasn't a stack of angry accusations, it was a ledger of negligence. A PDF dossier that included time-stamped emails, internal reports, rejected work orders, hazard photos, maintenance, logs falsified by mid-level managers trying to keep their jobs. I bundled it all with a letter titled simply, "Systematic Erosion of Industrial Safety Protocols at Stratex Materials," and then I sent it. The first copy went to the Indiana Occupational Safety and Health Administration, IOSHA. The second, more delicately framed for public consumption, landed in the inbox of Danielle Reyes, an investigative journalist with the Indianapolis Ledger. She'd once won an award for blowing open a food processing scandal that resulted in federal charges. I figured if anyone could cut through corporate PR fog, it was her. While I waited, Mason Klein continued playing roulette with people's lives. I still had contacts on the floor. People who owed me nothing but were brave enough to text, "Heads up, they greenlit the plasma cutter this morning, still flagged red." That machine had a history. Faulty wiring, pressure inconsistencies, a cooling system that needed a full rebuild. Our lead maintenance tech, Polly, had literally tagged it "Do not operate" 2 weeks before my termination. Mason ordered it cleared anyway, said if it wasn't sparking flames, it was within tolerance. Every day, I'd get messages. A welder burned his hand because the thermal gloves were replaced with a cheaper, thinner model. A forklift nearly tipped over because they'd switched out the tires with an unapproved vendor's batch. And still, Mason strutted through the plant floor like he was untouchable. Then, on Friday, I got a call. IOSHA. A woman named Carla Morgan, calm and curious. "Ms. Monroe, we received your submission. We're reviewing it now, and we have some follow-up questions." That same afternoon, Danielle from the Ledger responded, short and to the point. "This is good. Very good. I'd like to talk, confidentially. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not out of hesitation, but out of something else. Relief, maybe? For the first time in months, someone was finally listening. Not just nodding in meetings or tossing my reports into digital trash bins. Actually listening. That weekend, the plant ran the night shift with half the usual oversight. And the plasma cutter? Still humming. I didn't need to sabotage anything. I'd already set the real machine in motion, and this one didn't run on steel or sparks. It ran on truth, and it was only just warming up. It happened on a Wednesday morning shift. I was folding laundry when my phone lit up with 3 missed calls, all from numbers I recognized. Floor workers, maintenance techs, even Janine from HR who hadn't spoken to me since the day I left. The 4th call I picked up, and Polly didn't even say hello. "It happened, Rachel," he said. His voice was shaking. The plasma cutter blew. I don't remember setting the laundry basket down. I just remember staring at the tile floor, cold creeping into my chest. "Who?" "New guy," he whispered. Luis Vargas, 19. They had him feeding sheet steel into the cutter unsupervised. No training, no PPE beyond the basics. His legs gone. I sat down hard. Luis had been hired 2 weeks after I left. Still on probation, barely knew where the fire exits were. I remembered seeing his face in a photo someone had texted me when Mason posted a staff selfie captioned, "Fresh. Energy. Leaner operations." Fresh. Lean. Disposable. By noon, the story had already been sanitized. Mason stood behind a podium in a hastily arranged press conference out front of Stratex, sleeves rolled up like he'd just stepped away from the plant floor. "We're deeply saddened by this unfortunate accident," he began, looking into the cameras with an expression carefully curated to say, "Leadership under pressure." "We are conducting a full internal review. Initial findings suggest deviation from protocol by the operator." I almost choked on my coffee. Then came the real dagger. "We also find it regrettable that this incident occurred so shortly after a disgruntled former employee distributed confidential documents and contacted external media. While we do not speculate on intentions, the timing is worth noting." That was it. 1 sentence. No name. No accusation. But it did its job. Within hours, the comments started popping up online. LinkedIn posts, company Slack screenshots leaked, by allies still inside. Crazy how people sabotage just because they got fired. That's what happens when safety becomes political. Guess someone wanted to be right at any cost. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I printed every one of those comments, archived the press conference, sent the clips to my lawyer and to Danielle at the Ledger, who replied within minutes. They just handed us their throat. What Mason didn't realize is that people like me don't need to break things to prove a point. We just need to document how broken things already are. And that machine, the one I warned them about, I still had the time-stamped service reports with Polly's digital signature. 3 requests to take it offline. All denied, 1 with Mason's initials in the margin. Luis Vargas was no footnote in my story. He was the spark that made the fire undeniable. And this time, the blaze was going public. 3 days after Luis lost his leg, I sat across from Sandra Levine in her Chicago office, watching her flip through my binder of documentation like a surgeon, scanning x-rays before an operation. She didn't say much at first, just a soft, every few pages, the occasional raised eyebrow, and 1 long whistle when she reached the maintenance log with Mason's initials scrawled next to. The words "too expensive." "Push deadline." "Rachel," she said finally, tapping a manicured nail on that specific line. "This alone is bad, but this..." She gestured at the stack of OSHA guidelines, internal emails, time-stamped reports, even screenshots from our old safety system before it was mysteriously streamlined. "This is a pattern of negligence." And if he's now implying you had something to do with that explosion? Oh, we are not just playing defense. I blinked. You think we have a real case? Sandra leaned back and gave me that tight, predatory smile only trial lawyers know how to wear. I think we might own the board. It got real the next morning when Eddie from Technical Services texted me. Got something. Meet me at the diner. No phones. Eddie had always been a quiet guy, kept his head down, didn't gossip, but he also never let Mason walk all over him. When I showed up, he slid into the booth like he was planning a prison break. He wiped it, Rachel, he whispered. The log file from the plasma cutter, the one that showed the override alert. It's gone from the system, but I pulled a local backup from the machine's internal memory before IT locked it down. Took me 2 USBs and a lot of coffee. He handed me a flash drive and looked me straight in the eye. They knew it was going to fail, and they pushed it anyway. An hour later, Carmen from accounting called me from a number I didn't recognize. They're threatening bonuses, she said quietly. Mason called a meeting yesterday, said any staff caught collaborating with external narratives would forfeit Q4 incentives. Said the press is out to twist things and we need to stand together. She laughed bitterly. Half the room just stared at the floor. I told her about Sandra, about OSHA, about the ledger. Carmen didn't hesitate. I've got copies of expense approvals for parts that were never ordered. Maintenance requests marked closed that were never fulfilled. You'll have it by tonight. I hung up and looked out the kitchen window. My backyard hadn't changed, but I had. A week ago, I was just trying to walk away with my dignity. Now I was walking straight into the fire with a legal team behind me and an army of silent allies still inside the walls. Stratex thought they buried me in that exit interview. They didn't know I was a seed, and I had just begun to grow roots under their foundation. It started with a whisper in the local paper, just a small blurb buried on page 6. Former Stratex safety officer raises questions about incident leading to worker injury. No names, no fire. Yet. By the end of the week, the Indianapolis Ledger ran a full Sunday spread. Above the fold, color photo of the Stratex front gates, police tape still flapping in the breeze, and the headline, Safety Slashed, Inside the Plant That Ignored Warnings. That's when everything blew wide open. OSHA investigators showed up unannounced at 7:52 a.m. on a Wednesday. I know because Eddie texted me from the parking lot. They're here, 6 inspectors, hard hats and clipboards. Mason's face is purple. By noon, half the shop floor had been roped off. By Friday, OSHA filed a preliminary report, 48 serious violations. Some were what I'd expected: missing guards, faulty pressure seals, failure to follow lockout-tagout protocols. But some were worse: storage of flammables near heat sources, expired fire extinguishers, multiple forged signatures on inspection logs. Things that, if they'd caught fire, literally or legally, could have taken out more than just a leg. Then came Luis. I hadn't spoken to him since the accident. I didn't want to push. But that Friday night, I got a text from Sandra. Turn. On Channel 4. Now, there he was, on the screen, still in the rehab center, blanket pulled over the place where his left leg used to be. His voice was steady, though. Stronger than I expected. She told me, he said. Ms. Monroe, Rachel, she told me not to touch that machine, said it was flagged, said she'd written it up 3 times. But the line lead said we had targets to hit, said if I didn't run it, someone else would. I was 2 weeks into the job. I didn't think I could say no. They cut to a clip of Mason from an earlier press conference, saying it was an unfortunate case of operator error. Then back to Luis. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't screw up. I just wanted to keep my job. He looked straight at the camera. They knew. They all knew. I sat back in my chair, heart hammering. This wasn't just damage control anymore. This was blood in the water, Sandra called 10 minutes later. It's moving, she said. IOSHA just filed for Emergency Enforcement Authority. They're shutting down 2 lines. Press wants a statement from you. I said nothing for a while. Then, I'll give them one. They thought firing me would make me quiet. They didn't count on a kid losing a leg and speaking truth to millions. They didn't count on their scapegoat turning out to be the spark, and the fire had just begun. They say karma moves slow, but sometimes she moves like a wrecking ball in steel-toed boots. The Monday after Luis's interview aired, Mason didn't show up to the plant. Rumor was he was working remotely to manage the media narrative. Translation: panicking from a hotel room with a lawyer breathing down his neck. But by Wednesday morning, it was official. Stratex Materials Board of Directors issued a statement confirming Mason Klein had been terminated effective immediately. The same press that had once printed his self-congratulatory fluff pieces now turned him into a public punching bag. Headlines read, CEO ignored warnings before catastrophic injury, and cost-cutting over safety, the human price of greed. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. On Friday, I got a call from Sandra. She was grinning through the phone. Rachel, she said, I just got confirmation. The Marion County District Attorney is moving forward with criminal charges against Mason, officially. I froze. Wait, actual charges? Not just fines or settlements? She read them out to me like a grocery list. Criminal negligence, willful endangerment, obstruction of regulatory oversight, and the big one, reckless conduct resulting in bodily harm, a Class D felony in Indiana. This isn't civil court anymore, Sandra said. He could go to prison. For the first time since this entire ordeal started, I felt my spine relax. Meanwhile, IOSHA wasn't done either. After the inspection, they hit Stratex with a temporary suspension of operations across 2 major facilities. The plant was now under mandatory shutdown until every single violation was addressed and independently recertified. According to Carmen, yes, the same Carmen from accounting, now turned quiet informant, Stratex's stock dropped 19% in 3 days. Their investors were livid. Shareholders were demanding emergency meetings. And from what she heard, they were preparing to sue Mason personally for damages incurred during his tenure, and me? I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't need to. Luis was the voice. Terry was the witness. Vanessa had the receipts. IOSHA had the authority. All I had to do was sit back and let the truth do what truth does best when it's finally unchained. Burn through the lies like acetylene through steel. Mason once told me that safety was a luxury mindset, that people like me held back progress. But the only thing holding back progress was a man who thought cutting corners made him visionary. Turns out, a courtroom has very little patience for vision when it costs someone their leg. 3 weeks after Mason's fall from grace, I got a B. Call I never expected. It was from Greg Holloway, interim CEO appointed by the board. Former military, soft-spoken, not much for showy words, but his voice on the phone was measured and respectful. Rachel, he said, we'd like you to come back. I laughed. Honest to God, laughed. You're kidding, right? After everything? No, not as a band-aid or figurehead, he said. We want you to help rebuild this place, on your terms. I didn't say yes immediately. I gave them a list, a long one. First, every system flagged by IOSHA gets fixed. No shortcuts, no temporary workarounds. Independent third-party inspections on everything. I told them, if one bolt is loose, the doors stay shut. Second, double the maintenance. Budget, not negotiable. Third, the creation of a cross-departmental employee safety and ethics committee with real veto power. If someone on the floor says something's not safe, it stops. Doesn't get reviewed. Doesn't get noted. It halts. Greg didn't blink. He nodded. Done. And so, I walked back into Stratex, not through the side door like someone begging for a second chance, but through the front, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 OSHA advisors and a union rep. You could hear a pin drop when I passed the main floor. Some workers applauded, others just stared. I didn't care if they liked me. I cared if they felt safe again. In my first week back, I shut down 2 lines, approved $1.2 million in repairs, and rehired 5 maintenance specialists Mason had laid off. I had Carmen moved to internal controls full-time, overseeing compliance. Eddie, promoted to technical standards advisor. We weren't just putting out fires anymore. We were ripping out the faulty wiring that let the fires happen in the first place. Stratex wasn't healed overnight, but something had shifted. There was trust. There was accountability. And for the first time in years, there was a sense that someone at the top actually gave a damn. I wasn't there to be nice. I was there to be necessary. And this time, they knew the difference. 6 months later, Luis walked across the stage at Stratex's newly implemented Safety Week kickoff. Slowly, on a prosthetic leg, supported by a cane in one hand and a steadying breath in the other. But he was smiling. The entire production floor stood in silence as he was introduced, not as a victim, but as the company's first safety ambassador. Stratex had given him full lifetime medical coverage, a paid role in employee outreach and access to every training event. But this was his moment. He looked into the crowd of workers, most of whom had never even seen him before the accident, and said, "I used to think silence was safer than speaking up. I was wrong. Rachel tried to warn me, and now I'm here to make sure nobody else stays quiet." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine. Later that day, I stood at the podium in front of the press, something I never thought I'd be doing again. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved too close. One reporter asked me if all the investment in safety was worth it, given the financial cost. I didn't blink. "Safety isn't a line item," I said. "It's not a cost. It's a commitment. A human one. If your margins depend on cutting corners that could kill someone, your company doesn't deserve to exist." I didn't flinch when the quote made headlines. We weren't a PR campaign. We were a rebuilt promise. That night, as I stood outside the plant with my coat pulled tight against the wind, I thought about everything we'd been through. Luis's scream, the silence that followed, Mason's smirk, the moment I pressed send on that report to IOSHA. Every step had been a fight. But we made it. Not because I was fearless, but because I refused to walk away from what was right. Because sometimes to fix a broken system, you have to be willing to stand in front of it and say, "No more," and mean it. If this story made you think about justice, courage, and true value at work, hit like, subscribe, and share the video. You never know who might need to hear an inspiring story like this today.